What's up guys, Miss Passier here with my contribution to the Game Changers Territory War Strategy Guides. Mobile Gamer already covered earning banners, Crazy Excuses covered defensive squads, Arnold covered offensive squads, Going Nerdy covered the ship aspect, and I'm going to be covering the teamwork and guild organization. Speaking of organization, I did create this little Territory War template for pretty much anybody to use. If you want it, you can take a screenshot right now, or you can join my Discord server, link in the description below, where I have it available for download. Let's jump right in. So, one of the first questions that everybody asks is, why is the preview phase 24 hours long? Well, the answer is pretty simple. 1 day period is for people to configure their rosters and then join the territory war. They basically did this so that it wouldn't just lock your roster the way it was as soon as the day rolled over or as soon as the territory war started. Basically, you get a 24-hour preview phase where you can set your mods, move, gear up any characters that are close to the next tier, whatever you want to do, and then join the territory war, because once you join in the preview phase, your roster is frozen in time. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you add any more gear or move any mods after you've joined the territory war, those changes won't be reflected as the territory war progresses. So you can use this to your advantage, and I'll explain that later in the video. But if you do make any significant changes to your roster during the preview phase and you've already joined, all you got to do is tap that little leave button right there on the screen, which on the live build is actually further over to the left, and then rejoin the territory war in order to refresh your roster. It's as simple as that. What this also does is it allows guilds to keep players who are going to be active on their roster for the matchmaking. Obviously, you don't want to get matched up against a guild that has a much higher active GP score than your guild, because you have maybe one or two really big rosters completely inactive. Now, in the defensive phase, this is where you're going to be wanting to use your less active players. Not your inactive, hopefully those haven't joined, but your less active players will be able to maximize their efforts, I guess you could say, in the defensive phase. For smaller guilds, obviously the GP prize bracket is going to be dependent on maximizing your participation. For the players who may be less interested but still want to help out, defense is the perfect role for those players to take. Defense is literally just a set it and forget it role. If you aren't planning on participating in the offensive side of the house, then you really only set your defensive squads and then wait for the rewards to roll in a few days later. And this brings me to my first strategy for guild organization: designating roles. As most average players, and I'm talking to all of you free-to-play folks out there, you know I love you, you're only going to probably have about 4 to 5, maybe 1 or 2 more good teams. And I'm talking fully modded, all out 4 to 5 good teams to build from your roster. So it's going to be important not to stretch people too thin. It's important to remember that once you use a character, they are consumed, air quotes here, for the duration of the territory war, which means that they cannot be used on offense if they are used on defense, and vice versa. If you want to use a character on offense, obviously don't set them on a defensive squad. An easy way to make sure that you do this is to have your guild split up into an offensive group and a defensive group. This also allows players who can't mod enough teams to focus their strong sets on just a few squads instead of trying to stretch themselves thin. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where I mentioned you could use the preview phase to your advantage. If you're designated to use your squads on defense, you can coordinate your mods as such. Since you likely won't use your defensive squads on your arena team, you can move your arena team mods over to your defensive squads and then join into the territory war and move your mods back without affecting the setup for territory wars. And it will probably also help players to have a defense and offense tab set up on their squad select screen to speed up setting those common defensive squads or picking those common offensive squads when they're going to do their territory wars. Now, I do want to emphasize that splitting up your guild isn't going to work for every single guild. There's not really any one-size-fits-all strategy that can fit all guilds. So if you do have players that have stronger rosters that are leaned more towards a defensive setup, say they have more Zetas on defensively strong characters like Zeta Barris, or more tanky geared up characters like multiple tanks at gear 11, gear 12, then you're going to want to ask those players to probably set more teams on defense, and if they happen to have a lot of characters left over for offense, they might be able to help out significantly on offense as well. And that is a perfect segue into my next point, teamwork. After you've organized your guild appropriately, it's important for your guild to exercise teamwork appropriately in order to maximize your effectiveness. This means that guilds might have to actually designate an officer to be in charge of territory messages to identify locations for strong defense or weak defense according to the strategy being used, and also to designate target territories in the attack phase. One important thing is going to be trusting your guildmates to follow instructions. Attempting to micromanage your guildmates will just make this game mode dreadful for everyone. And the most important thing is to ensure that everyone has fun. This is just a game, guys, and nobody likes an overbearing boss. And in the attack phase, it is especially important to coordinate your attacks with guildmates. You may actually be able to take out one really strong team with just a couple of weaker teams that are capable of exploiting weaknesses. Remember that this is almost like a guild versus guild version of Galactic War, where once you attack a team, if your team happens to die completely, if you lose all of your characters, whatever characters are remaining on the enemy's squad are left for the rest of your guild, or for you, to send in another team to try and finish them off. This also means that those characters may be starting with preloaded turn meter in a similar way that our little practice events have had preloaded turn meter. Now I want to take a minute, just sit right there. I got a message for the guild officers. Nope, not the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I want to make a special point to all of you guild officers out there who are watching this video. And speaking of guild officers, I want to give a special shout out to Nukin from the Republic, fellow game changer who really helped me out a bunch with this video. His channel link is in the description below. Make good use of your territory war tools, the guild officer tools that were put into the game. Those tools are going to make your life incredibly easier. Make sure that you're saving those default messages like attack this phase or attack this territory first, or set strong defense here, set weak defense here. Use those templated messages or create those templated messages to make your life that much easier when you need to go and designate certain territories as the target territory or whatever else. Also, don't get too wrapped around the axle. This game mode is obviously going to evolve. The same strategies that work at the very beginning of Territory Wars may not work a few months from now when everybody's figured it out. The most important things are going to be making sure that people are using their resources, using their rosters effectively and efficiently. Obviously not exercising overkill, as I did right there. I didn't use any of my reserve ships in that ship battle and ended up basically burning 4 potential ships for a later on attack, as I didn't set any of my ships to defense. I had all 4 of my fleet commanders available to use on offense, and I ended up kind of screwing myself because I could have used those 4 characters that 4 ships that I put in my reserves on a weaker fleet to either take it out completely, defeat it, or maybe just wear a little bit of a hole in it. So it's important to make sure that your players are not throwing their Commander Luke Skywalker Chase squad against a squad of under-geared Ewoks, so to speak. So the biggest name of the game here is going to be teamwork and coordination. If you are unsure about which excuse me, which targets you should be hitting, go ahead and ask. Don't be afraid to ask an officer. And officers, don't be afraid to make sure that your guilds actually know what the primary targets are, because if you're in a situation like I am here where I have 3 territories that I can attack, I want to know which territories I need to be prioritizing and which one is the top priority. If our top priority is taking care of ships right now, then I need to know, hey, try and take out as many fleets as you can. Or if you know that you have players who are very, very, very well far advanced with their ship roster, like they have a very, very deep ship roster, then maybe you want to save those folks until the territory 8, which is the last territory on that last far right line of territories. You want to save, maybe ask that guy to save his ships for later on, where you will be able to take advantage of his deep roster to hopefully take out the stronger ships that were set in that higher priority territory. And then you also want to make sure that all of your players are doing whatever they can. Once you get down to the very last bits of territory and the very last few squads that you have to beat, you're going to be seriously scraping the bottom of your barrels. And that brings me to my other point. You definitely don't want to be blowing all of your top squads on the first few territories. Now, obviously, depending on the defensive strategy that the opposing guild has used, you may or may not run into some very, very high-end squads set on defense on those first 2 territories, 1 and 2, and you may run into some very, very strong defensive squads on territories 3 and 4. So it's going to be very dependent on how the defense was set up and how you decide to conquer that, bearing in mind that there are only 16 maximum squads set to defend any single territory. So, to summarize, before you click that green join button, make sure that you've got your mods set the way you want them and all of the characters that you were planning on gearing up, geared up. If you're going to be setting your squads primarily on defense, make sure your defense are the best modded. And likewise for offense. If you happen to get that last shiny piece of gear from a raid right before the territory wars kicks off, make sure you leave and rejoin after gearing up that last character from gear 9 to gear 10. If you're a smaller guild, make sure that you're maximizing participation and contribution. Make sure that players with smaller rosters know what role they should be filling, if they're going to be set primarily for defense or if they're going to be primarily for offense. And definitely make sure that you're coordinating with each other in guilds so that you know who's got what Zetas on what characters, because that will matter. If you've got a Zeta Barris, you probably want to set at least one defensive squad with Zeta Barris. I, for example, don't have a Zeta on my Barris on my main account, so I probably won't be setting too many squads on defense. I'll probably opt in for more of an offensive role in territory wars. On that offensive note, you'll want to make sure that you're not engaging in overkill. You don't want to be sending too many characters in to beat or clean up an enemy squad. Say they've only got 2 or 3 characters left, you don't even have to send in a full 5-man squad to kill those 2 or 3 remaining characters. You can only send in 1 if you want, 2, 3, 4, or 5-man squad to kill those last few characters. Bottom line is that Territory Wars is going to be very interesting. You're going to be dusting off some characters that you haven't used in a really long time. For example, droids are probably going to see some use in Territory Wars because, let's face it, droids were pretty dang stinking good once upon a time. Unfortunately, they're not meta, but that doesn't mean they can't be extremely useful for Territory Wars because they are a very good high damage squad. You're also probably going to be using some of those characters on your roster that you never would have thought in a million years that you would have even used for anything. Because like I said, by the time you get to those very last territories, you're probably going to be scraping the bottom of your roster in order to find a squad that you can use to maybe clean up that 1 or 2 characters on an enemy squad. Also, one thing to note, rewards are good even if you lose. So give it your maximum effort, but at the end of the day, the rewards are still better than nothing, and it's still just a game. Have fun, guys. Make sure you check out Mobile Gamer, Crazy Excuses, Untitled 101, and Going Nerdy's videos on Territory Wars. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, favorite, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter. Join my Discord server to continue the conversation, and I'll catch you later.